Hi, Shadi.
Hi, Anand.
How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
It's a
How about
pleasure
you?
to have you here.
Thank you so much. This pleasure is absolutely mine. So I have been a big fan of yours for some years now. So it's such a pleasure to be here today.
That's very kind of you. So, today my guest is Shadi Sharif Azadeh. She's an associate professor at Civil Engineering and Geosciences faculty and the co-director of the Sustainable Urban Multi-modal Mobility Lab at TU Delft in the Netherlands. Her areas of expertise include integration of OR with behavioral models for transport, mobility, and logistics networks. Currently, she has several national and European projects tackling different aspects of transport planning and operations. Shadi is an associate editor at Transportation Science, an editorial board editor at TRB, and an editorial board member of TRC. She also serves as an associate editor of Nature series Sustainable Mobility and Transport Journal. She's a recipient of several prizes, including the Doctorate Excellency Award at University of Montreal, as well as the Michael Florian Award for the best PhD thesis in Canada. Shadi, thanks a lot for accepting the invitation. I'm really happy that you
Thank you so
are
much.
here.
Thank you for the invitation. As I said, I had been following your magnificent job in creating this podcast, which is unprecedented for the first time in our community. And you started during COVID, I believe. So it really changed the mood of staying in the apartment without seeing our colleagues and going to the conferences and so on. And you really made a difference, because then we got to see for the first time our colleagues, not only from a professional perspective, but also from a personal perspective. And yeah, I'm very grateful to you for taking that initiative.
That's great to know. I'm also very glad that you follow the podcast. I'm also deeply honored, that you took interest and that somehow made your life less boring during the pandemic.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Uh, so I hope to have pronounced your name more or less correctly, but could you say it yourself just to be clear?
Yes, the name is Shadi, and Shadi means joy in Persian. So in Farsi, happiness slash joy is the meaning of Shadi. But I know that also in different languages it does exist. In Arabic also exists, but I learned over the years that it actually belongs to male as opposed to female. And then I also know that in India it does exist with, I think it means marriage, I believe. Yeah, so there are a lot
Yeah,
of.
there's the site shady.com.
I know, I know. Yes, I have a matchmaking private business.
Yeah, you know that my name Anand also mean happiness and joy. So
That's really an interesting coincidence. So it's just meant to be. So it's I didn't know this. I didn't know.
yeah. Has anyone ever called you shady?
Yes, that's as unfortunate as it sounds. Definitely yes. But I usually don't correct people, to be honest, except for this particular example, because even though it's not a very difficult name to pronounce, probably, or they're just two syllabuses, but it's unfamiliar. So especially in Starbucks lines, or coffee shops, or back in Canada in Second Cup and so on, I used to use another. Just I would go naturally like Shadi, and then it was not obvious, and they were like, "What, shady?" And I said, "No, no, no, not shady, but you can use whatever you want except for this."
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah. So you were born in Iran. From which part of the country do you come from?
Yes, I was born and raised in Tehran, the capital. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm
Right.
I'm from there.
Your parents are highly accomplished scholars. I know about that. So tell me more about them.
Uh, Thanks for bringing them up and asking about them. Yeah, so my parents my dad is coming from the eastern part of the country, so from Khorasan province, and he was born and raised there, and then he did his studies in Tehran. So he moved to Tehran when he was 18. So he did his bachelor in law at University of Tehran, and then my mom is originally she has Azerbaijani background, so her family come from Tabriz, and then but she was born and raised in Tehran, and she also did her bachelor in Tehran in economics. And then they moved. They didn't know each other back then, and they got to know each other at Sorbonne because they studied economics for their graduate studies for master's and PhD at Sorbonne University in Paris. So they got to know each other there, and that was the rest is history. Yeah, so they came back to Iran before revolution. So they came back just before revolution happened, and they started working at university both as professors. So yeah, they worked for 35 years.
Wow. You once told me that for them, working as a scholar was beyond a job. It was a lifestyle, right?
Yes, indeed. So yeah, they really set the bar in that sense, and for me and for my brother, and we learned through their example, living example, what academic life constitutes and what are the expectations, yeah, so it was very inspiring to be in that environment. And then the very first time they bought me my blackboard, and so they bought me a small blackboard when I was like 5-6 years old, and my very first student was my baby brother. And then at that point it was really the starting. I found joy in teaching, and through them I found joy in learning through them. And yeah, so in my opinion, they led a life by example in that sense.
You mentioned your brother. You have only one brother, right?
Yes, I do have one younger brother.
Did he also do a PhD like you?
Yes, so but in a different field. So he's got a PhD at electrical engineering. So now he's a senior scientist.
Mm-hmm. It seems that your parents also helped you developing your interest in math and also poetry and things like that, right?
Yes, definitely. So math was big part of our household because of my parents were econometricians. So my mom was more of an econometrician, I would say. My dad had very wide interest in different, so it was economic and development, that the field. But at the same time, he was very much interested in philosophy, epistemology, and history of science, history of religion, and all different type of dimensions of social sciences as well as mathematics. And I recall, like even during those school years at night, my mom was always staying up, checking up on us, like to see like what type of exercises we were solving, and she was always interested. And she used to tell me when I was a kid, like even if you decide to get your diploma in high school and then you decide to become a housewife with no jobs outside the house and so on, it's always better to have a diploma in mathematics compared to any other thing. So again, I'm just quoting her. Of course, no disrespect to any other field, but this was her personal opinion. And but she had reasons, and she said, like, yeah, that's how you develop logic, and that's the sport for the brain, and you reason better. You can solve even the regular daily life problems. You approach them in a different way. So yeah, that was her belief. So I just followed the same path, basically.
That's very nice. You grew up during the Iran-Iraq War. Do you have any memories from that period?
Yes. So that was indeed the unfortunate period. The war took 8 years. So even when I went to school, it was still during the war. And these type of unfortunate catastrophes that are man-made, they create such trauma that hunts you down even in later life. Like after years and years, still this trauma remains with people. So that's why I still to this very day it happens that I remember very vividly, you know, the planes coming very close to the ground, you know, the bombardments, the going to the shelter. And you also interviewed Maryam, my colleague from Quebec, and we belong to the same generation. And I think she also mentioned the same type of trauma that she had to endure. So we lived at that time. Of course, we lived in Tehran, and then in 1986, 87, the Tehran bombardment was at its height. So that's why we had to flee. So overnight, one night my dad came home. We had to grab our stuff and just hit the road and go to the eastern part of the country because the war was in the west primarily, and then southwest, and then it moved towards the capital. So yeah, these type of trauma remains forever somehow.
Yeah, your family also had to deal with the aftermath of the war.
Yeah, so like any other family during that era, so 8 years of war is nothing that can be undermined. So it does have its impact on economy, on infrastructure, so research becomes a luxury as well. So I could also see that my parents had to shift from, so if they wanted to do research, it really shifted towards like writing books, you know, more theoretical work without really having that facility that would make it possible to do an impactful research, you know, that you need funding, for example, and so on. So I think it happened in all fields, also for engineering, for science in general. So that was from a career perspective. Also from economic perspective, the country suffered from the lack of economic growth, of course, and then followed by sanctions and so on. So it did have its impact like any other war. Yeah, but then little by little, you know, life needs to go on, and we still, for us as kids at that time, everything we knew was normal because we didn't have any other benchmark. And I think that's the beauty of human resilience at an early age. You find your way, and then you become also more creative in creating joy and also having a life of your own somehow.
Mm-hmm. And what did you like to listen in those days? And did you play any musical instruments?
So I like to listen to a lot of different things, to be honest. The range, when I was reflecting on this, I said like, oh my God, the range was really wide. So I did play. So I did have organ, and then it followed by became piano in the later stage. But I was never great at it, but I saw a lot of joy in it, and I still do. And I love the logic of music, and I find a lot of those components manifesting themselves in mathematics in general. So that's the beauty of art in general. But from a music perspective, it was very wide because my dad was very much in favor of classic music in terms of like Persian music, like Persian traditional music. He was a huge fan of Shajarian, who is very well known for Iranian audiences, and Paris. So, for example, again, these are the old times singers, and he was very much into traditional instruments. He used to play violin as a kid himself, and then from the other side, because my parents had also this French-speaking background due to their education, I listened a lot to Charles Aznavour, Enrico Macias, Mireille Mathieu. So my dad and my mom, they had the cassettes. You know, at that time we're talking about 80s. So we are millennials. So with these cassettes, we had them, and then my mom used to play them in the house. And because of her Azeri background, we listen also to Azeri music. For example, I have a lot of memory from Rashid Behbudov, again, the traditional Turkish songs, to Persian pop music, to classic music. Like I was a big fan of so Schubert and Bach. My dad had a collection of different symphonies, and we used to listen to those. It was a huge, wild range, to Kenny G or saxophone, or so it was really. And then I listened to Roxette. I really liked Roxette at that time. I think Michael Jackson, everybody loved it at that time. He was the star of that era.
Yeah.
So it was very, wild range of different types of musics. And it was still something that was, it was not easy to find, let's say, because except for classic music and traditional music, it was really not at everyone's disposal. But then, we had the cassettes, and we just tried to listen to them.
That's very impressive. I did not see Kenny G coming, I must confess. And,
yes, I really loved him.
I also must admit that I once attended a Roxette concert in Rio de Janeiro in, I think it was 2011. It's sort of a guilty pleasure. My wife finds it a bit weird that I like it, but I'm more into rock, classic rock, but some pop rock also, it's good at times. So I can relate to some of the artists that you also like. You mentioned Charles Aznavour, probably Edith Piaf. Your parents used to like.
Yes, Edith Piaf less, but Charles Aznavour definitely. So I knew his songs by heart before understanding them, because I learned French in the years afterwards. And then at some point I surprised my mom, and when we were living in Montreal, and then she was with us, and then he was having a concert in Place des Arts in Montreal downtown, and then she actually got to see him firsthand. So it was a very nice surprise. And we went also in Amsterdam in the very last year he was still alive. He was 91-year-old, if I'm not mistaken, or 92-year-old. So he had a concert in Amsterdam before COVID, of course, and then I also got to see him. So,
wow.
Yes.
Super nice.
Yeah, big part.
What did you do to have fun while growing up, in addition to listening to music?
Yeah, so for us, again, as I said, as kids during the war, I cannot say that we... So of course, I acknowledge the fact that many families suffered a lot. Many lost their loved ones, and were forever in debt to the ones who defended the country at that point. But still, people had their own share of being affected of that time. And lack of entertainment definitely was part of the... we were not talking about not only the current era, but it was also a very different type of society at that point. And I think for us, the safe haven was basically cinema and movies in general. So we got to know French New Wave again through primarily my dad. And then we also had specific programs for some reason dedicated to this at that time. So Nouvelle Vague, or the French New Wave. And then like directors like Godard, for example, or Truffaut, Agnes Varda, if I recall correctly. So these are the type of directors and the movies that we were really intrigued by, because they had a different perspective. It was all about meaning somehow. So I think in any other country, there are eras of enlightenment, if you will. So then, you know, there's a revolution in the literature or movies, or from a director perspective, from screenplay perspective, and so on. And then we could resonate with all those stories. And at that time, we also had a lot of Iranian great directors like Kiarostami or Beyzai or Kamal Tabrizi, and many, many more, who had fantastic like movies, or Hatami, who created a lot of historical movies at that time. And so it became really our go-to place, because movies, like music, as I mentioned, there's no boundary. You can imagine beyond the physical boundaries, and you can actually, they can take you away with their messages. And all of these movies were extremely metaphoric. And it was very interesting to see different perspective as a kid, and then when we were teenagers, and then when I look back now, I have a different perception of what the message was from those movies. So that was the main entertainment, plus board games. We played a lot of board games. Again, we were not allowed to go very much outside the house, so that's why we played a lot inside the house.
Mm-hmm. Great. Do you feel you had good education in high school?
Yes, excellent, to be honest. I think this is the quality of education was very high. Like the type of materials that we got, the type of books that we had at our disposal, and then the quality of mathematics, for example. It was really, yeah, I think at that point it was really something that was, we took it for granted probably at that point. But in the hindsight, especially when I left Iran and I started continuing my graduate studies, and I started teaching as well, I got to know that we knew a lot during high school. And it was sufficient to some years during even university, the information that we got from mathematical skills, for example. So yeah, so in general, that was a very nice era to get to know a lot of different materials.
Aside from your parents, did you have any role models at that time?
Yes, so that's actually an interesting story. And so at that time, I didn't, I went to, we did have this entrance exam for a specific type of schools. They were not non-profit, so I went to a public school. But then still, they were selective. We had to pass an exam. And then we had a very nice mathematics program. And it happened that for several years, we were studying hard, so there were a lot of great students actually in the class. I was selected for several years to go and attend math Olympiad camps that they were held in, nowadays it's called Shahid Beheshti University. So this is where the classes, the workshops took place. And when I was like in the first grade of high school, so we have the 5-year primary, 3-year of guidance, 4-year of high school. So the first year of high school, now everything has changed, so I don't want to bore you with this. In this mathematical camp, I got to know actually a lot of pioneers in mathematics. So from like the very old professors at Sharif University or in different types of University of Tehran and so on. And then we did have like young mentors from the ones who had won at that time. Iran was really sweeping away all these math Olympiad medals. So there was a very nice period of time where we did have quite a lot of Olympians in mathematical competitions and physics and so on. So they would come and they would just design questions. We had to solve them and so on. And I was, the very first day, I was really mesmerized and captured by one of these brilliant students. She was 5-6 years older than me. And then she had gained the perfect score from high school from an early age. And then she was studying mathematics at Sharif University. And this turned out to be Maryam Mirzakhani at that time. And she was, again, she was a humble, third year bachelor's student at university, and everybody loved her because she was so humble, she was so down to earth, and I was in awe of her skills and the passion that she had for mathematics, and really it instilled the love for math, I would say, in me at that time. And then I said, like, whatever happens, even though I'm not even 1/1,000,000th as talented as she is, I would definitely pursue this path, because she's such a beautiful example of the whole package, of everything about her, was like her attitude, her love for teaching, for mentorship, for solving the problems, coming up with problems simultaneously, like instantly, and without any preparation sometimes. So this was really impressive. So that was the beginning. So she became the role model eventually, because then I was following her story as the future unfolds. And then she moved to the States. She became a professor at Stanford University, and then eventually she became the very first female recipient of Fields Medal. So when she won it, actually, it was very much of an out-of-body experience, because I got to know her before she was famous, and before she had that incredible prize and success eventually.
Yeah, she was a role model to you and to a lot of people.
Many others,
and
definitely.
She tragically died.
Yeah.
So Shadi, you have a bachelor's degree in statistics from the same university as Mariam Darvish, who was also subject to a guest, as you mentioned. Why did you choose this field?
Yes, so my primary, as I told you, like, I had made my decision early on. I wanted to study mathematics, and I was staying true to this goal. I was never interested in engineering, to be honest, or any other field in particular. I liked physics as well. But then eventually my parents talked to me, and then they said, like, yeah, probably, you should not go for pure mathematics. And they also talked my brother out of this because he was also very much interested in pure physics and pure mathematics. But he eventually chose the engineering that was closest to both, which was electrical engineering. So in my case, I said, like, no, I really cannot see myself in an engineering field. So I really liked whatever that was mathematic adjacent or mathematics itself. And then, I got to know the field of statistics quite a bit. And then I liked the also applied part of it. And also it was a little bit of a interdisciplinarity in the field of mathematics. So it was not like pure mathematics, but it had like some implications and applications in different fields. So then, yeah, I ended up in this field.
Mm-hmm. And was OR part of the program?
No, it was not part of the program per se. Again, I had quite a lot of, like, there was analysis, there was topology, there was different type of multivariate functions, all these different type of statistics / mathematics courses, but not operations research. And operations research at that time was only part of the pedagogical program of industrial engineering in Iran. So that was really and they had, like, I think 8 credits or something only in industrial engineering, not in other fields as much.
Mm-hmm. But how did you learn about OR then?
Yeah, so the funny story, so I got to know my then partner, currently husband. So I got to know him. He was doing industrial engineering at Polytechnique of Tehran, or Amir Kabir University. And through him, I got to know the field of operations research. And because they were teaching them very interesting books and so on. And then we were discussing, and at that time we were also, working on our grades and GPA, because we already planned to apply at some point right before we finished our bachelor. So that was the plan, to send out the applications and go abroad. So we wanted to follow the same footsteps as our parents, because his parents also did the very same thing as my parents in terms of, that they share the very same history. So then I got to know operations research, and I was very much intrigued by the idea, and I could see the synergy between my background and his background, because he was coming from industrial engineering. And then we wanted to apply for the same positions, like for the same locations at least, and then same universities. We didn't want to be apart. And operations research became a bridge somehow. And more we learned about it, we could see how we can actually find a connection between engineering and science. And I was very much intrigued by it. So that was really the introduction to the field when I was in Iran.
Okay.
But still, it was not very in detail. So I just took books and read about it and so on. And yeah, officially it started when I moved to Montreal.
Very interesting story. Quite unusual way to learn about OR.
Yes.
That's very nice. You followed your parents' steps and went abroad for higher studies. In your case, you went to Montreal in Canada. Was that your first time in North America?
Yes, it was. In North America, definitely. Not in Europe, but in North America, yes. So I think the European experience was also, as a tourist, was very different from living in North America, even though, it's just in terms of like when you start living somewhere, it's a different type of experience. And especially like at the very beginning, I think when we were younger, again, the fear is even higher because you don't know what to expect and so on. So yeah, that was the first time I visited North America. That was the time that I also started living there.
Did you have any language problems? English, French?
So language, so we're talking about Quebec. So definitely we're talking about, and also we're talking about Montreal. So we're talking about two languages. And at that point, again, having lived in Iran before I moved, so again, we're good at taking tests in general. So because we have taken so many exams, and I had a high score in IELTS to get all the admissions and so on. But even IELTS of 7 at that time never guaranteed that you were able to actually communicate and then understand what people are talking about, and for even the daily life. So English I was changing gear at the beginning for sure, and then afterwards I had to learn French because University of Montreal was primarily French speaking, and then little by little, at the beginning, it's difficult all the time, I would say. And then I took a lot of French courses at the Faculté d'études permanentes, which was one of the faculties on the campus at the University of Montreal. They facilitated learning language as well. And I really loved it. As I said, like I was exposed to the language through the songs, through the background history, but I never properly learned it because I never took proper classes and so on. But I started learning when I was there. And then eventually I could learn French and again, English. We can survive.
Yeah. Tell me about your master's research.
Yeah, for master's research, so when I applied at that time, still it was possible to have scholarship for even for master program. So I started working with Professor Gilles Savard, who is actually currently still in Montreal, and he's directing the Ivado Center. So when I was finishing my bachelor, as I told you, I got exposed to operations research. And I worked for a very short period of time as a research assistant to a visiting professor from University of Neuchâtel. He's an Iranian professor, Professor Doj, who actually visited Iran, and then I got to work for him as a TA for a couple of months before I got my bachelor and then moved from Iran. So then I got to also know machine learning at that point through him because he was a statistician. And then he also has a lot of books on machine learning and so on. And then I was looking for something that was more on the like the prediction side, using neural networks, so we're talking about the pre-big data era, we're talking about pre-cell phone era. We're talking about the like the everything is analog era. So that's why I was very much interested in working with like different type of machine learning methods at that time. So, but we are going back to Shirani books, to Christoph Bischoff books, that type of really classic neural network. And I was very much intrigued by the idea, and I wanted to try using neural network for the sake of pattern recognition as well as prediction. So those are the two types of applications of the neural network. And at that time, I had started from discriminant analysis, you know, having a single neuron to be a single line, to compartmentalizing and partitioning space in two parts. And then, but it worked quite well for pattern recognition. And then not, for example, for image processing and so on. I took some courses also in the electrical engineering department for control and so on. And then eventually I decided to use neural network for prediction, because through Gilles, I was working with real data from high-speed trains. At that time, he did have access to this type of data, and then the forecasting method to see like what would be the number of passengers, for example, for high-speed trains or a Canadian airline and so on. So then I developed basically a machine learning method through neural network for prediction. I cannot recommend it, to be honest, these days. So I don't think this is the best option, because for prediction, you have many different type of features, different variables, like categorical variables, and then continuous discrete integers. Like this is, and it's not easy to get meaning out of that prediction, basically, because the activation functions that were used, like I used sigmoid function, for example. So it's like logistic regression. So for 0-1 situation works well, but not necessarily for these type of predictions. Mm-hmm. But it was a very interesting experience. And eventually we made it into a paper, actually, still available.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned discriminant analysis. My first steps into research about 20 years ago was through linear regression and discriminant analysis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, indeed.
It seems that you took a considerable amount of courses during grad school, right?
Yes, probably too much, I'm not sure, but that was a very rewarding experience, to be honest. Because on the campus of University of Montreal, you could audit or take courses from different faculties, and I never hesitated to take as many courses as I could. So but the program is a little bit different from Europe. So we had like the first 2 years somehow dedicated to taking courses, and then we had the comprehensive exam, and then the oral exam, defense of the proposal, and then the research, really hardcore research started afterwards. But I continued taking those courses even after defending my proposal, and then even after taking the mandatory courses for the doctoral program. And like there are very much specialized courses on integer programming, graph theory, like mathematical programming to like mathematical programming 1, 2, so you can actually take a lot of different courses. I took courses also from computer science, from statistics department, from electrical engineering. So I'm glad that I did it, and now again in retrospect, because it really opened a lot of doors. So into different opportunities, and I could see that the overlaps somehow between different methods in different domains, and how they can contribute to the main cause and the main problem, but from different angles. So yeah, probably I got a little bit carried away with this, but I don't regret it.
Yeah, you probably benefited a lot from taking a bunch of courses. And
yes, we were really fortunate with the great professors, and you have interviewed many of them. So the list goes on and on. So the very first book of linear programming, we call it Chauvatal linear programming course. So that was my like the opening line for the linear programming, of course, Michel Gendreau and J.P. Laporte, and you also I interviewed all of them. So yeah, I think it was a very nice opportunity in general to get as much information.
Mm-hmm. What about your PhD? Was it a continuation from your master's work?
No, not directly. Probably from because my supervisors were Gilles Savard, as I said, and Patrice Marcotte. He's now retired, but he was also very much, both of them were experts in bi-level programming. And he also interviewed with Luce Brodkorn and Martin Labbé. So both of them, they're very close friends, and they're also experts in the field. I got to know Luce when she was a postdoc of Patrice in Montreal. And so this was really their field of expertise. And then I had still an eye on the forecasting perspective. And given my background, so I did my bachelor in statistics, and then for the master's, it was more on the machine learning side. But I always had this this passion for coming up with different type of forecasting methods. And then this time it was through optimization. So they wanted to, again, we did try to find something to work on for my proposal. So I finished the comprehensive exam. I finished it successfully. And then I also defended my proposal. It was really within that context. And then it happened that I think it was in 2008 that I participated in an Informs revenue management and pricing, because all of these contexts really falls into the revenue management and pricing community. With bi-level programming, the Stackelberg game for the lower part, and then you incorporate the lower part as a constraint, the upper part, and then you solve the problem for a network. So that was really the typical way of tackling different problems. Then I got to know Garrett van Rijssen, who is now at Amazon, and at that time he was a professor at Columbia University, as well as Gustavo Volcano, who was at that time a professor at NYU, Stern School of Business. And then there was a paper of them related to revenue management and pricing given discrete choice models. So that was the very first time that I got to see choice models in a conference. And then they had a very interesting, so I think the paper was published in MSOM back then, like probably 2007-8. And then I was very intrigued by the idea of having individual behavior models, and then the market share, and then seeing that part of the marketing aspect of it, an econometric aspect of it, as well as the OR in the context of revenue management. And then I decided to take the chance to take yet another course. So I decided to take I asked Gilles about this, and also Patrice, and they introduced me to Michel Bierler at EPFL. So they said yeah, and then Moshe Ben Akiva, and Daniel McFadden, who actually won the Nobel Prize for the theory in 2001, so the utility maximization theory. And then they said yeah, you can take this course. It's given twice per year, once in Boston and once in Lausanne. I had already missed the Boston version of it, and then I decided to go to Lausanne for the very first time. So I took this course, and I had an idea, and I came back to Montreal, and I said yeah, I want to change my proposal if possible. So the idea was about, it's always easy to aggregate information, but it's very difficult to disaggregate information because you don't know how to disaggregate information. And at that time, I did have a scholarship that made it possible for me to work. So it was an NSERC scholarship with the possibility of working with industrial partners. So at that time, I was working at Expressio, which was the startup of University of Montreal, to get access to the actual data of high-speed rail data like TGV or Thalys, as well as Air Canada, for example, for passengers and so on. So, but the thing was, they always had this aggregated level of information. and the demand patterns would change. And what I wanted to achieve was how we can use this aggregated information to somehow get the underlying behavioral model of different segments of customers or passengers, for example, and then embed it into revenue management pricing. So then, because we do need that disaggregated level information if we want to have a control system on the capacity, for example, or pricing. So that was the idea behind it. And then I changed the proposal in that sense, and that became the starting point of the PhD.
Wow. A lot of things going on.
Yeah, sorry for that.
That's okay. Did you teach during your PhD?
Yes. So that about teaching. So teaching was only possible if you could speak in French for the bachelor and master levels, especially. So for, of course, I was not teaching in the PhD level. And then I took, as I said, I took the French courses from every week, like from 7 to 10 in the winter time, -30. And it paid off because I actually were able to learn the language to a level that I could teach. And I started TAing for different courses. So for OR courses, linear programming, mathematical programming, for statistic courses. Also, I did some TAing for courses in HEC, HEC Montreal. So then, yeah, it was very nice. It was another level of experience. Communicating with the students, and I really enjoyed it. It was also some extra money because of the it was not deducted from our scholarship. So again, financially, it was also beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And how was your first conference experience presenting a work?
So the very first time that I presented was actually during my master's defense, as ironic as it sounds. But again, back in Iran, I don't know how these days things work, to be honest, in the education system. But completely opposite to the Western world, in the East, people usually are not encouraged to speak in public. So we didn't have any type of training in presenting ourselves or writing a report to a very professional level, or even presenting for a general public or for specific community, like at university, for example. So then the very first time, probably I've done it from very low level scale, but not really to the degree that you are in front of a panel and then you have to present your work. So the first time was when I was presenting my master's, and then the conferences came afterwards. So then that era started. So I did have a panic attack, to be honest. So it was really an out-of-body experience. I was I was short of breath. I couldn't breathe actually at that time, and then I could feel my knees shaking and my hands sweating, and that was a very interesting experience. I had to say, okay, so cut. I cannot move on. I need a couple of minutes to get things together, and then everything, your mind can go blank when you're in that level of the panic, let's say. And then that was the very first. And I said, like, okay, so we have a problem here. We have to face it head on and then to solve it. So then all the experiences of going to conferences and everything else started as of that point.
And how did you overcome that difficulty?
So I think no one has the natural talent for anything, basically, from birth. I think people really develop different type of muscles throughout their life, and then the thing is whether you care enough to dedicate time to develop those muscles. And then I usually whatever scares me, I try to really go for it, And then, for example, when I wanted to learn machine learning, I wanted to learn operations research, and then I try to do it myself, but then some things are more difficult to be self-learned, and then you need to, probably take courses and so on. And I started teaching them. So teaching them helped me learning them in a different level, because then I had to really master the topic, not only learning it in a shallow level. And for the presentation, I did the same. So at that time, it does exist, like your thesis in 180 seconds, it does exist everywhere, I think, pretty much in the world. And then in Montreal, we also had this competition, but we're moving forward to the last year of my PhD. So 5 years had passed, and then I had already developed the language and also the from French-speaking part as well as for the English-speaking part. And then I took the chance of signing up for this competition for the French version of it. So I said, I want to present my thesis. I was really at the end of thesis when I had already my papers almost published. And when you have a lot of material, 3 minutes sounds crazy to squeeze everything in 3 minutes. And then I said, I want to present it in French. So there was an amphitheater with a mic, with a timer, clicking there, and with a panel from all across different fields. And it was like, jumping from a plane without parachute. But I think that level of adrenaline changed the game in terms of facing the fear head on and just not being afraid anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw you presenting now in Santiago, and you presented remarkably well. That it's tough to imagine that you struggle back then.
Practice, right? Practice and age. Yeah. Years had passed, and things become. I think when in repetition, things become more and more natural and easier. And teaching is a blessing in that sense. I can resonate with the performers in a sense, because we are always up on stage. You have to give your A game to the audience and engage them, and you need to keep the energy high to be able to deliver the message. So I think over the years we learn how to do this.
I absolutely agree with you. You finally went for a postdoc in Switzerland, and that turned out to be a game changer in your career, right?
Yes, indeed. So at that time, I was invited by Michel Bierler, who was still is the head of the transport lab at EPFL, for a seminar, and then eventually he offered me a postdoc position. So we decided to move from Canada to Switzerland to pursue an academic career.
Your postdoc supervisor had a tremendous influence on you, right?
Yes, indeed. So as I said, I'm really fortunate, and I'm in debt of a lot of great mentors throughout my life. From back then when I was in Iran to during my postgraduate studies, and then when I started my postdoc position at EPFL. So Michel really had a huge influence on the person that I am today, and hopefully I can get better as the future unfolds. And so he really gave me the opportunity to learn how the academic life works, from writing proposals. I got the Marie Curie grant, a postdoctoral Marie Curie grant when I came to Europe, which was also very big help at that point to also build up my research as an independent researcher, to teach in different levels. Also French helped, because EPFL was a French-speaking university. And then teaching at bachelor, master, PhD level events. So he trusted a lot on me, and then what I could deliver potentially, also involving me in different projects. So yeah, I really owe him a great deal in learning a lot of tricks in academia.
Yeah, also learning to deal with the industry, stakeholders, and all of that.
Yeah, right? Indeed. So I'm as I said, I'm moving from, at that point, I'm moving from mathematical background, having finished my PhD in mathematics operations research, to more engineering side of the spectrum, because I started my postdoc position in civil engineering faculty, civil and environmental engineering. And then I got the chance to work closely with industrial partners, European projects. For me, it was completely out of my comfort zone yet again, because I had worked in, as I mentioned before, like at Expressio, which was a startup at that point, and then eventually at CAE. But then having that different level of communication with industrial partners to get the information, the data protection, data management, all sorts of communications. I really got to know a lot about these things when I started working with him. So that's why that was a very intense, but also very rewarding training phase of 2 years and I think 2 years and a half in total, 2 years and 7 months. It took.
In your postdoc, you were involved with the development of a choice-driven optimization framework. Could you please elaborate more on this?
Of course. So as I mentioned during my PhD, I told you that it was about prediction of the demand, but I wanted to unravel what was the underlying behavioral patterns at disaggregated level, having taken the aggregated level information. So for that, I developed a global optimization framework. And actually, for solving that, I was very much inspired by one of the works of about the strengthening of a relaxation of a multilinear functions that was published by Jeff Linderoth, I think.
Yes, Jeff Linderoth.
Yes. Yeah. So I was inspired by his work for my PhD because I used it for like locally convexifying and linearization of the framework. So I used operation research for the sake of forecasting to bring like that, to take the aggregated level information and to make it disaggregated, and then use that prediction injected as an exogenous factor into revenue management and pricing. So for a control problem, again, another MILP, to have different type of like, let's say, results on the control of the capacity and so on. For at that time, the application was on the railway side. So when I started working with Michel, I got to know, as I said, like choice modeling was really the tipping point for me to change the paradigm in the proposal during my PhD. And then when I started working with him, he had a different way of looking at the choice and incorporating into optimization. So he would use the choice models. For example, there were like already a lot of PhDs in his lab who had used the market share of different, for example, alternatives, and for passenger distribution through a network of railway, for example. So again, in that, but he was estimating the choice parameters in a disaggregated level. So those information, he didn't need to actually start from a higher level to disaggregate data to a lower level and then, redistribute it. So it got us thinking about a different way of looking at the problem. So while taking the explicit definition of the choice through, for example, multinomial logit, nested logit, or whatever type of formulation, we wanted to have like the endogenously incorporate those like variables that will pop up in the MILP inside the definition of the choice model. So what does it mean? Because for the MNL, which is the multinomial logit, it does have this sigmoidal function. So it has a very well-defined closed form function. And it makes it possible to be incorporated in a combinatorial optimization, even though it still imposes quite a lot of nonlinearity and non-convexities if you have decision variables in the choice description, because it pops up in the nominator and denominator, but it's well behaved because of that closed formness. But you're very much restricted to MNL because of this property. But MNL comes with the price of having an independent and like IIA condition, which is irrelevant independent alternatives. And that makes it actually easier for, again, from an operational research perspective, to incorporate that linearization inside the platform, inside the problem itself. But the problem that happens is that you're very much restricted to not having any sort of a generalized choice model incorporated into the framework. So we came up with the idea of writing a proposal at that point for a national fund to define a new way of choice-driven optimization when you can get rid of that assumption and you can have a more generalized framework of the choice models. So that was really the stepping stone for, again, another avenue of research that opened up, and eventually we started working on several projects afterwards.
Why and how you ended up in the Netherlands after your postdoc?
So after finishing the after 2 years and a half almost, I was already in the job market as any other postdoc. And then again, I didn't look back to industry anymore. So I had made my mind that I wanted to stay in academia. And then at that point, I started searching for academic positions, again, back in Canada or in the US. And in Europe, I only applied for the Netherlands at that point. And then, so then you never know what happens. It also takes quite a bit of time. So most of the time it takes 1 year almost from the moment that you get to send the application till you get the offer. So it can be a very lengthy procedure. That was the primary reason. And for why we chose Netherlands, for 3 distinguished reasons that are still valid. One was the fact that for a relatively small European country, there are a lot of good universities. Like, again, there are a lot of different universities dedicated to not only pure science, also engineering schools and so on, business schools. So the chances that we had two-body problem, so the chances that both of us can get academic positions, even in 2 different corners of the country, and being able to live somewhere in the middle was still possible. That was for the family reason. And also, as I said, two-body problem. Second one, English is very much everywhere. So we did, as we have already been through learning French and English, of course, and then, and to this day, we're still trying to learn Dutch, and it's important. It's very important, but it's also, I'm no longer a student. It does also take time. So I'm taking courses, but it's a long process. But it's not as necessary, let's say, in academia. So all the courses are taught in English, and then also in society, you can definitely survive only speaking in English. And then the third reason was the fact that I knew a lot about the culture of research in the Netherlands when I was in Switzerland. And then I learned about how academic and industrial partnerships are very organic. They are not enforced, and you don't need to chase partners. It's very much embedded in the culture of the society. And that also creates a lot of funding opportunities, a lot of collaboration opportunities. So these were really the 3 main reasons, the 3 main drivers for this choice.
Mm-hmm. And you started working in 2016 at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam.
Yes, indeed. So Erasmus University Rotterdam was my first institution when I moved to the Netherlands, because at that point, as I said, Informs for me was the hub of information. And so I was coming from OR society. So I was interviewed for both, for several of the positions that I actually applied in the Netherlands through Informs. So I was already interviewed in the Informs conference without coming to the Netherlands at that time.
Mm-hmm. Why did you move to Delft in 2021?
Yeah, so I stayed for 4 years at Erasmus University, and then the culture of general universities or business schools are very much on a lot of a high load in teaching, and then also a lot of probably criteria on publication, specific number of journals. And then I told you there were 3 reasons for me to move to the Netherlands in the first place. One of them, that was the main one, one of the main ones, was the fact that collaboration with industry was very much facilitated. And it was not facilitated while I was at the general university because of the culture of universities. So I don't have anything against any type of university, but again, universities have their own way of, building their business, and then also having their for the newcomers and the new carriers also build their careers on those. For example, when we're talking about business schools, it's mostly about teaching or individual publications and so on in specific journals, because it's also going back to the ranking of the business schools that is defined in a different way. And then I was really missing that component as I made a conscious choice to move from pure mathematics and pure theory to towards a little bit something that is also more impactful, and I can see the tangible results, and then doing something in the society while collaborating with different stakeholders. And then it was not as facilitated for all the right reasons for a general university. So when the COVID hit, and while I was watching your podcast, it hit me that, okay, so that was one of the main reasons, and I'm missing that component, let's say. So even though I had developed my career to a good extent, let's say, in Rotterdam, and then I have really utmost respect for all my colleagues and also the scientific quality of the university. But I wanted to try something again outside that comfort zone, and that's why I applied for Delft.
And let's talk about a couple of your research projects. I'm particularly interested in the one related to the development of real-time methods to incorporate in combinatorial optimization framework for large-scale transport problems. Could you talk a bit about it?
Sure. So as I said, like again, I have having taken all this background of taking all these courses, all these programs, and bringing choice models into the combinatorial optimization from a forecasting perspective, and then at EPFL from a decision-making perspective. Eventually, I continued all my research in transport. So again, one block at a time, I got to know the fact that we're talking about a very complex and dynamic and multifaceted problem that is subject to change. So from an optimization perspective, from an OR perspective, we do require that equilibrium to find a fixed point between a supply and demand. So that equilibrium constitutes no change in the environment. So when the environment changes, we lose that property. So then again, finding the fixed point would be more and more difficult. But these days, all these, again, on-demand systems, when we're talking about traffic, for example, information, when we're talking about climate change and adaptation to climate change and its impact on transport. So all those factors are dynamically changing on a daily basis, and they have an impact directly on how we operationalize and design our transport services. So then I could see more and more actually the need for different set of skills to tackle the real-time problems while using operations research, because then we can still, we have all these type of Markov decision processes at our disposal, and then you have different types of like dynamic programming, just you name it. We have different ways of tackling this dynamism. But at the same time, it's important to capitalize on what these methods that are now revived, because they existed, I told you, like probably 17, 18 years ago, the neural network existed. We're not talking about something that is completely new, but now they're rebranded because we have more computational facilities to actually tackle these problems. So that was really the main reason behind going for more real-time decisions, and then how we can use these machine learning methods, if you will, not as a black box, but actually engineering them in a way that we can incorporate into combinatorial optimization framework for real-time decisions. So either we're talking about large-scale, for example, problems, when we can use all different sorts of We always end up in heuristics when we cannot find the exact solution, or meta-heuristic methods, but we can still benefit from like real-time forecasting to have more strategic decisions. We can also tackle the change, like model in some way, the changes in the environment to incorporate in our decision, again, in real time. So there are many different ways of bringing real-timeness into the equation, into combinatorial optimization. And that's the general canvas of the current research in most of these projects.
Yes, super interesting. I've seen your presentation on the topic. I think you use reinforcement learning at some point, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Another research project of yours that drew my attention is the one combining pricing and assortment optimization methods to model supply and demand interplay for last mile trip/delivery.
Yes, indeed. So again, most of when we are talking about the demand and supply interplay, usually we have two usual suspects, two bridges that brings them together. So we have the availability of the resources as well as the price. So these are the two most commonly used factors when we're talking about the demand and supply interactions. And then we can drive supply by changing the demand patterns, and then also it goes the other way around. So what can, as I told you again, that in that part, the revenue management pricing background helped to shape a little bit of that idea of in the literature. We do have a very rich body of literature in revenue management pricing when it comes to assortment optimization and pricing. So there are like great work of different scholars around the world. For example, Professor Topologlu or Gallego and Volcano, as I told you, like there are a lot of experts in the field, but not necessarily dedicated to last or first mile research, last mile or first mile trip or delivery, let's say, on-demand systems. So the choice is subject to the menu that is provided to the user or the choice maker. So the design of that menu in a real time, still it's a combinatorial problem, because then it can explode depending on how you define the alternatives, how you define the menu. It can still be another level of complexity into the regular event dispatching, or routing decision, depending on how you define the problem. But then this could be coupled like this alternative definition coupled with pricing, and also given the background of the preferences of the users, can create opportunity to provide a menu that is offered to the users that it can actually. So I think the supplier in that sense has the higher hand to provide the options that are beneficial for the supplier, while giving the opportunity to the user to choose whatever option that fits his or her preferences the most. Again, in that context, I have to also mention that if you want to encounter competition, you have another layer of complexity, competition between different suppliers. But in the framework that I have worked on so far, we always had a single operator, let's say.
Mm-hmm. You have also been given special focus on designing sustainable multimodal transport systems, right?
Yes, that's another, again, extended avenue of research, because it's not completely different, but it's from an impactfulness of the work. I think this is very important these days. Especially in Europe, we see more and more efforts on low-carb diet. They call it low-carb diet cities, or eliminating fossil fuel-related travel options. So when we are talking about climate change, we have two avenues to pursue, either adaptation or mitigation. And when we talk about mitigation, again, transport and urban planning are responsible for 21% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And the thing is, you cannot just eliminate travel options without providing alternatives. So you cannot just tell people, okay, so you don't use your private cars without providing an alternative. And in that sense, it's also very important to acknowledge that the opportunities are limited to, again, the list can go on, but the infrastructure, of course, is shared between passenger and freight. But you want to reduce the transportation activity. You want to encourage modal shift from fossil fuel to more sustainable options, vehicle efficiency, alternative fuels, and, for example, electric vehicles. These are the type of efforts that we see in the literature growing as well. But at the same time, we need to consider like the multimodality aspect of it. It's very important because the role of hubs are very important. If you don't consider them, then you cannot really consolidate the demand. You cannot think about redistributing the demand in a seamless way. We have to make sure that from the origin to the destination, people are still provided with viable options to execute their trips, who can be competitive with a low-cost usage of their private car, which seems not to be economically viable these days, for example, in countries such as US, but it seems to be a very obvious choice, let's say, in cities like, I don't know, Delft or Rotterdam or European cities, because then the public transport system is working quite well, relatively. Again, there are always rooms for improvement, but the aim is to minimize the travel time and also reassure that there is comfort and the seamless trip can be realized, let's say, from the origin to the destination for all type of users.
Yeah, it's all fascinating work. In addition to all the challenges you have to face mathematically, also in terms of algorithmic design and so on, you have to educate people. Also, it's somewhat involved in the culture, right? Especially when you think about climate changing and all those issues, it might require this overhead, and behavioral sciences also can play an important role there too. So I think it's a very fascinating topic, yet super challenging to be deployed in practice, I believe.
Yes, indeed. The challenging part is, again, the existence of many stakeholders. So when we were talking about revenue management and pricing and assortment optimization, we're talking about a single privately owned operator in a free market. And then we're talking about like capturing the spill of demand and then recapturing the spill, and then to make sure that you make the most profit. But the problem completely changes its definition when we're talking about the social welfare and subsidized public transport system, and then the designing of a system where you have a lot of stakeholders, from public transport operators to infrastructure operators to several privately owned companies who are running the on-demand last or first mile trips. And then you have to keep them engaged in this collective effort for a sustainable transport. And still it's up for interpretation, because we do have still, we have to calculate somehow the total cost and the total benefit for the society. And as I said, like from a platform perspective, if you want to do the matching, if you're looking at it from an Uber perspective, you have a very well-defined problem compared to the case where you're really looking at it from a society perspective and taking into account all the utilities and all the characteristics of these different stakeholders. So I think in that scale, the problem is way more difficult.
Yeah, a lot of things to be done for sure.
Yes.
I know you like to use the term corporate academia, which I myself find very appropriate at times, when referring to certain undesirable situations in academia. Could you mention some of them, and also how do you make your students aware of such corporate attitudes?
Yes. So again, going back, I use this terminology. I don't know if it has been used before. Again, I came up with the terminology of corporate academia because I do see, I can resonate with corporations, the currently existing culture in academia somehow. And I think probably the benefits and also the pitfalls of such system goes back to the same pitfalls and advantages that probably capitalism has to offer, right? Because we have, again, going back to my own story, when I said, like, yeah, I was exposed to all sorts of information through my, especially talking to my dad when he was a critic of all different type of ideologies when it came to extreme cases in economy. So extreme capitalism, extreme socialism, they all have the most costs and benefits, let's say. And when they start out of goodwill for the good reasons at the right time. But then when they develop, they can have also damaging effects. So in that sense, it's interesting because I do resonate with the definition of what we can say we can criticize capitalism for. So we always say that it can ignore the sufferings of the workers, like the ones who are trying to build up their career or then start to from the lower level of the society in terms of the academic academicians in general. So especially the newcomers, the new starters, new academic careers. And then another, so this is one of the main pitfalls, we say, like the ignoring the suffering of workers in general. And then the second pitfall of capitalism is wealth of companies are built up on what are not essential needs of human beings. So this is what we see, in my opinion. These are all my personal opinion, right? So I'm just, that's why I'm using this terminology, because I think this corporate academia is encouraging also incremental contributions. So we do see this tendency of, publishing more is better. And I think that could be damaging to the literature. So we are still seeing that there are a lot of research that could be polluting the literature as opposed to adding something to the literature.
Yeah, a lot of noise going on.
It's a lot of noise going on. And again, it's very difficult to detect who is doing fundamental work that actually can push the limits and make a substantial change in science or in the way that we look at different difficult problems, as opposed to really incremental work. So I think these two are the most dangerous parts, because if it does have benefits. The benefits of a corporate academia is motivation. So it shows that if you have them, if you have the X factor of whatever X factor that could be, if you are willing to, and if you're hardworking, and if you hang in there long enough and do your best, you can achieve, which is great because that gives a lot of freedom. Micromanagement is not encouraged. I think these are really the advantages of this or corporate academia. But on the other hand, the damaging part are the fact that again, the new starters can be, the well-being of new starters can be completely ignored. We do see more and more pressure on younger generations starting their careers in academia. And this is something that should not be overlooked. And I think this is something that needs to be taken care of. And we do see a universal problem when it comes to well-being of academicians and scholars around the world. PhD students, postdocs, the work pressure is high, and there is no joke about this. And as I said, the second one is it encourages the more the merrier, which is or either explicitly or implicitly, but that could completely backfire, and then it can also damage science as well as the well-being of individuals. So in that sense, I think for my students, I always encourage them to zoom out. I think getting a perspective always helps. You see things in order. And I encourage them. For me, going to museums, for example, or art, poetry, literature, history gives you some sort of a perspective, because you see that life and history, they are nonlinear functions. When you go to museums, for example, Delft is a very nice place. You mentioned that you have been to Delft, and in Vermeer Museum, you see that regular and ordinary life has been celebrated through his eyes, as opposed to, this magnificent David painting when you see the coronation of Napoleon. So I try to point out as frequently as possible that you have to celebrate ordinary life, and you have to enjoy your work, and something that is completely insane, completely parametric, and no one can actually quantify it as success, should not be something that you chase, because it's like chasing a ghost. You don't know what you're actually chasing, and it could be very damaging to individuals' health, mental health, and physical health. So yeah, that's why. Sorry for the lengthy explanation, but off the top of my head.
No problem. Yeah, I think we should be really careful when addressing these issues with our students. I think we should not give up on the task of training them to be scholars rather than just writer of papers or something like that, you see. So I think, developing critical thinking and understand the real value of doing something relevant research-wise or academic-wise in general, I think that is something that we should really pay attention. And I feel that some of our colleagues are kind of overlooking that. So when you educate the younger generation, we should not, make them lose the touch and just becoming this factory of papers and something that is not actually moving forward. And as you said, it becomes really hard to detect what is actually relevant out there in this ocean of things. And if you don't learn how to swim,
yes.
you sink. And right. Would you like to give a final message to our viewers and listeners, especially the young folks?
Yes. So first of all, let me thank you for this very interesting discussion and for having given me the time. So I'm very, very grateful to you, Anand, for this amazing opportunity. For the words for the young audience, if you will, I don't know if I'm qualified, but at the same time, my suggestion would be to first and foremost try to enjoy whatever you do. So I think that is extremely important. We should not be doing any sort of, not like research is just one example, but we should not choose any career or anything in life if we are not really passionate about it and we don't want to really pay the price. If you're willing to pay the price, you never feel tired, and work is not really work. So that's I think the one big lesson that I have learned over the years. We should not settle for something that we are not enjoying. And then another one would be, if I want to close it into 3 points, is about the power of choice in life. So again, nothing is set on stone. We always have the chance to change our trajectories in research, in careers, and in topics, and whatever that we find intriguing and we're willing to pursue. I think it's important to know that we do have the choice of making good changes and making contributions, and hopefully for positive impacts. And then the last one would be about keeping the well-being in corporate academia. So the point that we mentioned. So I think it's also very important to keep a healthy attitude and not get carried away with all this competition and the noise, but then be enthusiastic about all this beauty in collective efforts in making positive impact in whatever capacity that we are capable of. But then one step at a time, even one baby step towards something positive can make a lot of difference. So yeah, I would say these are really the main takeaway messages that I would like to give.
Thanks a lot for that. Very useful and insightful for the younger generation. Shadi, has been a pleasure to talk to you. The moment I saw your presentation in Santiago, the moment I saw you for the first time, I knew you were somebody that is gifted in a way, very competent and clever, smart, true scholar, I must say. So I didn't have any second thoughts when thinking of inviting you to be part of the podcast right after that moment. So it was also very nice to connect with you right after that. And I was also very happy to learn that you were following the podcast and so on. So I think we started with the right foot, and I hope to keep on interacting with you in the near future. Who knows, collaborating in a research project. So thanks a lot once again for being part of the series. And it has been wonderful to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Anand. The pleasure is all mine. And thank you for having taken the time. It's a lot of effort for this, for organizing, for also all the preparation and everything else. So I'm extremely humbled to have been considered. So I really don't consider myself as worthy, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
No, come on, it was a very easy choice. So Shadi, I hope to meet you in person. You know where to find me in Brazil. Just drop me a line if you come to this side. And in case I have the chance to travel to Europe, maybe we can meet again and stay in touch.
My absolute pleasure. Look forward to it.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And take care. Bye.
You
Ciao.
too. Ciao.